And you can call me a social justice warrior. You can call me whatever the fuck you want. At this point, I don't give a shit, okay? That's it. That's who I am.
Try this at your next party. Ask your guests to define the term social justice. Okay, it's not charades or Twister, but it should generate some interesting conversation, especially if your guests are on the political left. Since everyone on that side of the spectrum talks incessantly about social justice, they should be able to provide a good definition, right? But ask 10 liberals to tell you what they mean by social justice, and you'll get 10 different answers. That's because social justice means anything its champions want it to mean.
Your leftists in the United States, all these professors and all these beautiful civil rights defenders, they are instrumental in the process of the subversion only to destabilize the nation. When their job is completed, they are not needed anymore. They know too much. Some of them, when they get disillusioned, when they see that Marxist-Leninists come to power, obviously they get offended. They think that they will come to power. That will never happen, of course. They will be lined up against the wall and shot. But they may turn into the most bitter enemies of Marxist-Leninists when they come to power. It's the same pattern everywhere. The moment they serve their purpose, all the useful idiots are either be executed entirely, all the idealistically minded Marxists, or exiled or put in prisons, like in Cuba. Many former Marxists are in Cuba.
Almost without exception, labor unions, universities and colleges, private foundations, and public charities claim at least part of their mission to be the spreading of social justice far and wide. Here's the mission statement of the AFL-CIO, but it could be the mission statement for 1,000 such organizations. Quote, "The mission of the AFL-CIO is to improve the lives of working families, to bring economic justice to the workplace and social justice to our nation." In short, social justice is code for good things no one needs to argue for and no one dare be against.
The main emphasis of the KGB is not in the area of intelligence at all. According to my opinion and opinion of many defectors of my caliber, only about 15% of time, money and manpower is spent on espionage as such. The other 85% is a slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community and their country.
What is that strange alliance? Because you see this all the time. You know, a group like Code Pink that stands for women's rights and anti-war, you would think they would be standing for women's rights all over the globe, but instead they'll rant and rave and, you know, talk about Gaza. Meanwhile, if they ever went to Gaza, I'm pretty sure that these women would not be treated particularly well. So this double standard just endlessly exists, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's very, like I said, it's disheartening for one, and because I was somebody that feminism was a huge part of me leaving religion. It was a huge part of me, of fueling me, and the women's rights causes of fueling me into my activism. It's been especially painful to see that feminists are not always on the same level as me.
Well, feminism, like any other ism, like Marxism or liberalism, has to be taken as a political movement. So it isn't the case that if you believe in equality between men and women, you're automatically a feminist. You have to look at their policies and who their leaders are. And at the moment, I think it's one of the most divisive and exclusionary groups out there. Just look at feminism in London, a big conference being held in London in a few weeks' time. They have no platform, some very serious feminist thinkers, because they don't fit into a very specific mold of feminism. Perhaps because they distinguish between women and transgender people, or because they are pro-pornography. Lots of different reasons, but they don't actually want to bring these women together to discuss women's issues. They want to exclude them, and they only want to have a very specific platform that the most women, truly most women, just can't fit into.
It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The result you can see. Most of the people who graduated in the 60s, dropouts or half-baked intellectuals, are now occupying the positions of power in the government, civil service, business, mass media, educational system. You are stuck with them.
I have come to feel strongly that the greatest service I can still render to my fellow men would be that I could make the speakers and writers among them thoroughly ashamed ever again to employ the term social justice. Why was Hayek so upset by what seems like such a positive and certainly unobjectionable term? Because Hayek, as he so often did, saw right to the core of the issue. And what he saw frightened him. Hayek understood that beneath the political opportunism and intellectual laziness of the term social justice was a pernicious philosophical claim, namely that freedom must be sacrificed in order to redistribute income. Ultimately, social justice is about the state amassing ever-increasing power in order to do good things. What are good things? Well, whatever the champions of social justice decide this week.
I personally can't associate with feminism because, especially in the West, what feminism is attacking is not violence on women and not violence on women across the globe. It's focusing on things like the gender pay gap, which the Office of National Statistics has proven is not true for women between the ages of 20 and 40. It's focusing
the gender
on
pay
things,
gap is just under 10%, isn't it? 9.4%.
If you start taking in the reasons why there's a gender pay gap, like women choosing to work less hours and women choosing to take time off, then the pay gap basically disappears. And lots of feminists like to say, well, we need to protect women because women aren't capable of making their own choices. They're not. Yes, they are. They're saying we're not capable of choosing to take the same route that some of our male counterparts are. In which case, women are actually more likely to be promoted and more likely to make more money. But a lot of feminists say, if you don't fit into that very particular field where you can't make other choices, then we don't want to accept you. We're going to no-platform you.
You cannot get rid of them. They are contaminated. They are programmed to think and react to certain stimuli in a certain pattern. You cannot change their mind, even if you expose them to authentic information, even if you prove that white is white and black is black. You still cannot change the basic perception and the logic of behavior. In other words, these people, the process of demoralization is complete and irreversible. To get rid of society of these people, you need another 20 or 15 years to educate a new generation of patriotically minded and common sense people who would be acting in favor and in the interests of the United States society.
According to the doctrine of social justice, the haves always have too much, and the have-nots never have enough. You don't have to take my word for it. That is precisely how a UN report on social justice defines the term. Quote, social justice may be broadly understood as the fair and compassionate distribution of the fruits of economic growth. Social justice is not possible without strong and coherent redistributive policies conceived and implemented by public agencies. Let me repeat that. Strong and coherent redistributive policies conceived and implemented by public agencies. And it gets worse. The UN report goes on to insist that, quote, present-day believers in an absolute truth identified with virtue and justice are neither willing nor desirable companions for the defenders of social justice. Translation? If you believe truth and justice are concepts independent of the agenda of the forces of progress as defined by the left, you are an enemy of social justice.
And yet these people who've been programmed and, as you say, in place and who are favorable to an opening with the Soviet concept, these are the very people who would be marked for extermination in this country?
Most of them, yes. Simply because the psychological shock when they will see in future what the beautiful society of equality and social justice means in practice, obviously they will revolt. They will be very unhappy, frustrated people. And the Marxist-Leninist regime does not tolerate these people. They will join the links of dissenters, dissidents.
Yes.
unlike in present United States, there will be no place for dissent in future Marxist-Leninist America. Here you can get popular like Daniel Ellsberg and filthy rich like Jane Fonda for being dissident, for criticizing your Pentagon. In future, these people will be simply squashed like cockroaches.
The invocation of social justice always works from the assumption that the right people, the anointed few, can simply impose fairness, prosperity, and any other good thing you can think of. And the only institution capable of imposing social justice is the state. And keep in mind, the conventional wisdom among liberal elites is that conservatives are the ones who want to impose their values on everyone else. The self-declared champions of social justice believe the state must remedy and can remedy all perceived wrongs. Anyone who disagrees is an enemy of what is good and right. And the state must therefore coerce them to do what is socially just. And that, as Hayek prophesied, is no longer a free society.
You have celebrities who decide to take on feminism and make themselves the voice of feminism. You have to understand that those are your political leaders in the same way that people won't be conservative because of David Cameron, or they won't be Labour because of Jeremy Corbyn. When Lena Dunham and Emily Blunt come onto the stage and they say, we're feminism, this is what it means, and you have big conferences, no platforming people, it makes it impossible for other rights.
You see, the useful idiots, the leftists who are idealistically believing in the beauty of Soviet socialist or communist or whatever system, when they get disillusioned, they become the worst enemies. That's why my KGB instructors specifically made the point, never bother with leftists. Forget about these political prostitutes. Aim higher. This was my instruction. Try to get into large circulation, established conservative media. Reach, filthy rich movie makers, intellectuals, so-called academic circles. Cynical, egocentric people who can look into your eyes with angelic expression and tell you a lie. These are the most recruitable people, people who lack moral principles, who are either too greedy or too suffer from self-importance. They feel that they matter a lot. These are the people who KGB wanted very much to recruit.